All right, hello from the Badger Rock Kitchen. Here we are for another one of our virtual cooking workshops. It is cherry season out there, you all. So if you have a sour cherry tree or you know someone who has a sour cherry tree, they are going crazy right now at this time of year. And I will tell you, our cherry trees here at Badger Rock have been super, super productive this year. So get out there, pick some cherries. It is the time of year for it. And we've been waiting all year for this moment. So we have a bunch of sour cherries to work with, and what I'm going to be showing y'all how to make today is a cherry hand pie. It's sort of similar to an empanada, and it's also similar to just a mini pie. So we're going to start by making our own homemade pie crust. So I'm going to start with just some flour. I prefer to use unbleached flour if I can get some, just because, I don't feel that we need to be having pure white flour. It doesn't really matter what it looks like, it matters what it tastes like. And so we're going to start with just 2.5 cups of white flour. And this is my mom's recipe for pie dough. So you might have people in your life or yourself who use lard, who use Crisco shortening. I just use butter. It's my only type of fat for pie. And that, in my family, is kind of our family recipe. So that's what I'm showing you today. So I put about a teaspoon of salt in there too. If you want to measure it, you can go ahead. I just kind of eyeball it with the salt. I'm going to mix that salt and flour up together so that they are all combined. And then I am going to take butter, a lot of butter. That's what makes it delicious. So we're going to use 10 2/3 tablespoons of butter. So one stick is 8 tablespoons. So don't be shy, put that whole stick in there. That's what's going to make your pie dough taste delicious. And we are going to just I'm just going to cut it into smaller pieces so that I'm not trying to work with a whole brick of butter, working it into the flour, and I'm just going to put it into this flour mixture. So there's my 8 tablespoons, one stick, and then I'm going to put 2.25 tablespoons besides. So I'm just going to get this in there. You can use cold butter. It just takes a little more elbow grease to get your butter worked into your flour. Or, honestly, you can use butter that's room temperature. And I know a lot of people chill their pie dough before they roll it out. You can definitely do that. It helps it hold its shape better. But if you don't chill your pie dough, it's easier to roll. So I actually usually don't chill my butter, and I usually don't chill my pie dough. And it turns out so good, y'all. So right now what I'm doing is just working that butter into the flour and salt mixture. I'm just pressing the butter through my thumb, with my thumb against my pointer finger, just to work that butter in and get it all incorporated in with the flour. And this is the same kind of dough I use when I make quiche. It's the same kind of dough I would use to make a large pie. It is so easy to make, and it is really delicious. Some people add a little sugar into their pie crust too. The downside of adding sugar is it makes it a little more crumbly to work with, so you try to roll it out, and sometimes it crumbles on you. So you can see how this butter is pretty much totally incorporated in to this flour at this point. If you want to use a pastry cutter for this part, you can. I just love getting my hands right in there, so that's how I like to do it. Okay. And once that is all together in there, it was that easy, and there's only one more ingredient in a good pie dough, and that is water. So I'm going to get about 1/4 cup of water. And the water is the trickiest part because you just want to add enough for the dough to hold together. If you add too much, your dough is going to be too sticky. If you add too little, it's not going to hold together in a ball. So it's kind of a a process of trying it and adding more water if you need. But the thing is, you can't take water out, right? So if your dough is too wet, it's going to be a little harder to salvage. You can add some more flour. But I would suggest starting with 1 tablespoon at a time of water and see how many it takes. Because it also depends on the humidity of the day. If you're cooking in really humid weather, you probably are going to need less water. If you're cooking in a really dry weather, like the middle of winter, you might need a little more water because there's less moisture in the air to help out with holding it together. So I'm just incorporating this all in here, and it really is a by touch. See how it's starting to come together, but there's still quite a bit of free flour on the sides. So I just added a little bit more flour. I think for this recipe with 2.5 cups of flour, it took us about 6 or 7 tablespoons to get where we wanted to go with the dough. And then just roll it around and kind of knead it to incorporate it all into the dough together. And you know what? I might even need a tiny touch more water, so let me just grab that quick. So pie dough is not hard. It just takes a time or two of trying it, and then you are good to go. Great. So I'm going to call this good enough. It's sticking together, but it's not wet and sticky. I'm just going to scoot these out of my way here. Yeah, this is just about perfect. Holding together in a nice ball of dough. Okay, and if I was making one big pie, I would split this dough ball in half, and I would roll one side out to be the bottom of the pie, and I'd roll one side out to be the top of the pie. But since we're making ham pies, we're going to make them quite a bit smaller. So I'm just going to take a little ball from the dough over here, and I'm going to run and grab a rolling pin real quick. And while I'm gone, check out these beautiful cherries. Freshly picked by our elementary school kids today. Doesn't get much fresher than that. So I'm going to put a little flour on my cutting board or my counter, and on the top and the bottom of the dough. And then I'm going to get a rolling pin, and I'm just going to start rolling it out. You want to roll it pretty thin when you are making ham pies. And you can either just roll this into a circle yourself, or you can use a cutting tool. So what we were using today with our students was the threaded lid of a wide mouth ball jar as a cookie cutter. But since we are just making one for a demo today, I'm going to just kind of make it into a circle. And you can kind of cut the edges if you have some edges that you don't like the looks of. But also, we're going to pinch these edges together so it will all work out. So there's your dough. This is about how thin you want it, about less than 1/4 of an inch, I would say. And once your dough is ready, you are going to be ready to start in on your filling. So let me just wash this off my hands real quick. And the most time-consuming part of a cherry pie is getting the pits out of the cherries. So we did that part with our classes today using a cherry pitter. You can use a special pitter, or you can also just squeeze those pits out with your hands. So you can see these cherries are already pitted. And here is the pitter machine that we use. This was like $20. You just slide your cherry in, push this, and this little metal pitter pokes the cherry, the pit shoots down into the bottom, and you end up with a cherry that is pitted coming out of that little spigot. So yeah, that is that. And then we're gonna start in on the cherries. So to make a good size amount of ham pies, we're gonna use 3 cups of pitted cherries. So I'm gonna just load these right up. 3 cups of delicious cherries. And then we're gonna put 2/3 a cup of sugar. Especially if you're using sour cherries, it's a good idea to add some sugar because they are, no joke, sour. And then we're going to add some cornstarch. And the cornstarch is just to thicken it up. If you've ever cooked with cherries, you know that they are really, really juicy. So cornstarch is a great ingredient just for thickening up if you're working with a really juicy kind of a fruit. So I'm going to put 3 tablespoons in here. You can also use tapioca if you prefer to cook with something like that. So very simple: cherries, sugar, cornstarch. If you want to add a little cinnamon, I often will add cinnamon to mine. And what we are going to do is we are going to just put it on the stovetop and, oops, you know what? Our stovetop pot went away, but here's the other truth about a cherry pie. You don't actually need to cook the cherries before you put them in a pie. In fact, when I make big pies with my family, I do not cook the cherries ahead of time. I just mix them with the cornstarch and the sugar. But if you want them to be extra nice and cooked, especially if you're making ham pies, which are smaller, so they might not cook as long and your cherries won't get as soft. For ham pies, it is a good idea to cook your cherries ahead of time. And you just want to cook them on the stovetop until the cherries are starting to get softer and the sugar is dissolved. So when you are good and ready and have your ingredients all mixed up, you can put, if you're making a little ham pie using those ball jar tops to be your cookie cutters, you only need 1 tablespoon. But since I'm making a pie that's a little bit bigger, I put about 2 tablespoons. Just put it on one side of your circle, and then you're going to fold your circle over the top. And you are going to pinch the top and bottom of this little crust together. Like so. You can also use a fork to crimp the edges if you want that kind of pretty crimped look on your ham pies. But you can also get a pretty hand crimped look with your fingers. So just like this. And then don't forget to make a couple holes in the top of your pie for any air to escape so that the steam can get out of here. So I'm just going to make a little star shaped pattern just to make it pretty. And there is a ham pie. And all you need to do is put it on a baking sheet. If you have parchment paper, that's the easiest to clean up afterwards. Pop it on a cookie sheet on some parchment paper. Stick it in the oven at 400 degrees. It really only takes about 10 minutes to cook if you're cooking a pie this small. So pop it in there. Once you see some of the cherry juice starting to bubble out of the air slits, and once that crust is starting to be golden brown, you can take it on out of the oven and you have a cherry pie ready to go. So thank you all for tuning in. If you have other kinds of pies that you like to make, pop your recipe in the comments. We'd love to see it. And if you have other ideas of things that you can make out of the sour cherries that are abundant at this time of year, let us know. We'd love to hear it. Thanks for tuning in. We hope you love your pie, and we will see you all next time.